welcome to tonight's Q&A, where we're going to be covering the 2019-2020 bushfires that devastated Australia. Unfortunately, these bushfires had 26 lives lost, nearly 2,500 homes burnt down, with 5.5 million hectares of land burnt. We have some representatives who were all involved in the fire in one way or another with us this evening, and we're going to be talking to them about their perspectives and getting an understanding of how it affected them and responses since. So we have Onyu joining us as a community representative who was present at the time of the bushfires. We have Shannon joining us from an Indigenous cultural perspective. We have Shuming joining us representing the government, and Santiago, a firefighter who was involved in fighting these bushfires. I'd like to take a moment to allow you all to introduce yourselves and your involvement in the fire. Onyu, would you like to start?
Yeah, hi, my name is Onyu, and I was a resident in Cobargo during the fires. And so I just wanted to share what my experience was and just help have everybody have an understanding of what it was like to live through it.
Fantastic. Thanks, Onyu. Shannon.
Hi, my name is Shannon, and I'm a cultural representative specializing in the Indigenous culture.
Shuming, would you like
Hi,
to introduce?
I'm Shumi, and I'm a staff from the government, and I will share some of my experience too.
And Santiago.
Hi, my name is Santiago. I'm a representative of the firefighters of Queensland. We were in the first line trying to solve this huge problem that was the fires.
Fantastic, and thank you all for joining us tonight. We're looking forward to hearing about what you have to say and understanding how it's impacted you and the future steps. So the first question on the agenda tonight is, what were some of the major factors that contributed to the severity and spread? With you, Santiago.
Well, as we could see in the last years, the temperatures have increased a lot. Also, we have huge parts of time with no rain at all. That makes the green parts of Australia were really dry. So when the fires start, it was just fuel. Also, the other part is that there are some locations in Australia that are really difficult to access. So when we cannot go into these areas, the fire starts and spread faster.
Okay, thank you. Shannon, would you like to comment on it from an Indigenous perspective?
From a Indigenous perspective, it's just been a lack of preparation. What we have found is that Indigenous ways of controlling fire have not been taken in by modern society in Australia as well as they should have been. Things like control fires and cool burns haven't been used as much as they could have. These ways of controlling fire could have prevented such a huge consequence from the 2020 fires.
That's really interesting. So do you think there's been much that's changed, as much we can learn from these Indigenous perspectives?
Yes, so much. I mean, they've been taking care of the land for tens of thousands of years. So if we did take on knowledge that they have acquired from these experiences, we could definitely have decreased the severity of the damage and learnt a lot to help decrease these events from happening in future as well.
Thank you. Now, from a government perspective, we've got some firefighters' opinions, what they saw and how devastating it was, and maybe some lessons learned from an Indigenous perspective. What's your take on the severity and what contributed to it from a government perspective?
Okay, so from the government, I think from the data shows in the government, the wildfire occur every year, and people are not without experience in preventing and controlling wildfires. The Australia Fire Department conduct backfire every winter. That is taking advantage of the cold weather to burn excess vegetation and bring fire breaks in necessary area. In the previous summer, the wildfires were easy to control and heavy rain would come as scheduled. However, now the wildfires have burned from 2019 to 2020, human measure and the regular weather are failed. So in my opinion, there are too many reasons for this wildfire. One is the lack of the funds for the fire department, and there is not enough manpower and financial resources to completely control the wildfire. And another reason is the global warming, especially this summer. It is not so the global warming will also accelerate the spread of the fire, but also miss the regular rainfall.
Thank you. That's really interesting. All right, for our next question tonight, we want to talk about how local communities and emergency services responded to the Black Friday fires and what's changed since in management and policy. Onyu, we haven't heard from you yet. Would you like to start us off?
Yeah, so from just like a resident's perspective, the wildfires, they do happen every year. So we were sort of prepared for it, but we weren't really expecting such a large scale of fire. So it wasn't really what we were ready for. Specifically in my town, there was a lot of people that had water ready to help save their own homes, but unfortunately, it wasn't really possible. So I know a lot of people that were trying to stay behind, even when it escalated so much that the government told us to leave. A lot of people tried to stay behind to save their homes, and unfortunately, it just didn't really happen. And I know a lot of firefighters couldn't get to some of the remote places that Santi has already explained. So a lot of us, we didn't have the choice other than to escape. So we lost everything that we've had. We lost a lot of animals and a lot of sentimental things that we could never get back. So
That's a real devastating loss for the people, and hearing your story is really special. So thank you for sharing that with us. Would anyone else like to comment on the emergency service response, perhaps, or what's changed since in management and policy?
Yeah, well, in our perspective, we were overwhelmed by the magnitude of the fires. We didn't have enough resources. Fuel was not enough. We didn't have enough cars. When we realized we were fighting in a lot of fronts, not enough men, like the government representative already said. Thankfully, some other firefighters corps from different places, America, Europe, even WA and other states come to help us. However, the main issue that we had was we didn't have enough equipment. We were not prepared for that. And how we communicated with other agencies was not proper. So basically what in my perspective we can say is that we will learn that we need to have a completely like monitoring and communicate ways between agency to try to solve really fast these issues. Also the investment in airplanes that could like land water in remote areas. It's one of the things that we most needed.
Thanks for that. Shannon, did you have any thoughts from an environmental or Indigenous perspective?
Yes. So the Indigenous people were extremely traumatized by the fires, as you can imagine, because they do put a really high value on the land and the animals, basically just from a spiritual connection, as well as the efforts that they have put into for tens of thousands of years in trying to protect and make sure that the animals and plants are sustainable for the future generations. The Indigenous people did feel like the emergency services were not very accommodating to them, unfortunately, and because of the fact that there was so many preventative controls that could have been put in place prior to the fires to minimize the damage, there was quite a lot of frustration, mainly with not incorporating cultural practices and preventative measures.
Thank you for sharing that. Now, a common theme that I'm sensing here is there's a little bit of lack of communication between different people and lack of preparedness and obviously this was a really devastating fire event, but what can we learn from this in your perspective? If there was one thing that coming from each of your perspectives that you would see as a benefit or something that if you could change it, what would it be? Just a final wrap-up comment, just something quick. Anu?
I think it's just important to think of how what we're doing now is going to impact our future. For example, like global warming in the environment and all of those things. Like, just trying to be more mindful of what we do so that we can prevent bigger things from happening in the future.
Really, really valuable point. Shannon?
Just thinking outside of the box and not going outside of old practices and incorporating practices that we may not have thought of too, and just making sure that we collaborate with every single community in the area for different knowledge and perspectives on the situation.
Thank you. Shuming, do you have something you'd like to add?
Not a lot.
Okay. And Santi?
Yeah, like the same that we were saying, like it is important to like create channels of communication between the community, the First Nation people, and the firefighters and other entities of the government. So with these channels, we can have a better response to these types of extreme events.
All right, thank you all for joining us tonight on Q&A, and really appreciate your time and sharing your story with us. Thank you.
Thank you for the